Morning, Humanity Church. So good to be here with all of you. Man, big exciting day. We're going to be baptizing some individuals after our gathering, which is always exciting. And if you've made made a decision to follow Jesus and haven't been baptized, we'd love to baptize you today. So that might be your story today. We also are sending a bunch of our youth to camp this summer, which is awesome. And so they have baked cookies and brownies and cinnamon rolls. I can't vouch as to whether or not they are good, but buy them, all right? And if you're on a diet or you can't eat cookies, give a donation. We're gonna send them off to camp today. Well, we have been in the book of Esther, going through this conversation called Invisible Threads. How many of you have been getting the messages on the church app every week? If you haven't, that's okay. You can download the Church Center app, and we've been in the scriptures every single day, going through this powerful narrative called Esther. In fact, I'm going to have the ushers right now hand out this week's reading plan because we as a community are making a commitment to be in the scriptures through this book as we engage it, as we go through Esther. How many of you have one of these with you today? No shame if you don't, it's okay. But we're going to ask you for the next few weeks to bring one of these with you as we continue in this narrative around Esther. Esther's it's this interesting book because it's the only book in the scriptures that never mention God once. But all throughout it, there are threads that weave together this divine plan that clearly God is in, and weaving together people in the middle of it, and where you can sense where God is moving, but you can't really see him until the end of the story. If any of you have ever been to our home, we have a small 1,000-square-foot home. It's quaint, it's wonderful, 1 bedroom, 2 bath. It's worked out great for us until our boys hit an age where they need the bathroom a little more often. And it doesn't really work to send them out to the corner in the backyard as much anymore. And so we decided that we were going to start the process of putting another bathroom in our house and a small addition on the back of the house. And so we hired an architect to do this. I didn't know you had to do this. I just thought you hired Josh and he built a room for you. But apparently you have to hire an architect and get a structural engineer and then get permits from the city, and we are in the process of that. But we got these blueprints back, and here's the cool thing about the blueprints is I have them in my living room, and I look at them every single morning, and I know exactly where that bathroom's gonna be. I know exactly where the toilet's gonna be and the sink's gonna be. I know where our new shower's gonna be. Sometimes I walk around there going, I'm gonna use the bathroom right here someday, and over here I will clean myself someday. And it's just exciting to know exactly what's gonna be laid out. And I know that in a few months from now, all of these plans will become reality. And wouldn't it be nice if God did that with us? If he just handed us the blueprint and said, hey, I know it's a mess right now. I know it's a struggle, but in a few months, you're going to get that raise. I know it's crazy right now, but in a few months, this diagnosis is going to be taken care of. I know it's crazy right now, but this relationship drama that is the center of your world will be restored in some way, shape, or form. But he doesn't, does he? And it's so annoying. And so all we get is the thread in the moment, the thread that we're on here and now. And that is what we get. And so how do we capitalize on the threads that are in front of us if we don't have the blueprint available to us? Now, if you know me, one of my biggest critiques about modern Christianity is how passive it has become as a movement. And it shows up in all of our language. It shows up in how we engage one another. It shows up in how we even engage God, where Jesus often becomes the perfect excuse to not act, to not engage, to not step out in life. And so it's interesting how often when we don't want to do something, we don't just say, I don't want to do it. We say, I need to pray about that. Now, not that you shouldn't pray about things, but it's interesting that rather than just saying, I don't want to do it, we say, I want to pray for it. Or we just say, I'm just going to wait for God to move. And then we'll see what happens. And if we're not feeling it, we don't have to act on it, because if we don't feel it, clearly God isn't in it some way, shape, or form. And then when we have conflict with people and then we're invited into the conflict, hey, you need to go have that conversation, or would you ask forgiveness, or would you go make amends, would you restore? I can't tell you how many people say, well, you know what? I'm just going to give it to God. And if he wants it restored, he'll restore it in his time. It's so passive, right? We make statements like, I'm just putting it in God's hands. The other night, I was listening to a friend, actually, who was on Instagram, who was speaking at some event, and he was inviting people to come, and he made this statement. He said, if you feel called to come, come. And I thought to myself, I don't know if God's gonna be like, you showed up at that event to hear him speak? I did not call you to go there. You are not called to go show up and listen to the word preached that night. You are not called to worship. So it's interesting how passive our language has become. But here's the reality is that while we're attempting to put things in God's hands, isn't it interesting how God's hands oftentimes look a lot like our hands? That God rarely just swoops down with some divine hands, but when he wants to use hands, he tends to use these hands, or your hands, or our hands collectively. What if one of the reasons we never actually see the threads that God is weaving in our lives, or we never actually capitalize on them, is because there are some threads that God brings to us, but there are other threads that we get to choose to engage in, to act on, to move with. If we go back on this story of Esther, she's this orphan refugee who's found herself in this nation, and the king has this spat with his wife and essentially executes her, and now he's on this hunt for a new wife, and so he throws this beauty pageant, and he forces all the young women who are beautiful to come and compete in this beauty pageant, and the king chooses Esther to be his wife, and now she is the queen of the nation that she was once an orphan refugee in, and she's found favor with the king, and her uncle, Mordecai, has found himself in a predicament, because he actually overhears that the king's assistant Haman has decided that all of the Jewish people who Esther was were going to be executed. He goes to the king and actually gets his rubber stamp on this plan and said, hey, these people are not good. They're going to be a mess for the nation. I think that we need to execute them. And he starts going out through villages and executing the Jewish people, God's people, and hey, Mordecai gets a hold of this, and he's so frustrated. And so he comes to Esther now in Esther chapter 4. So if you have a copy of your scriptures, you can turn with me. Esther's kind of a cool book to find, because if you just open up your Bible in the middle, you'll probably be in Psalms, all right? And then you can just scoot 2 books before that. Job, Esther is right after that. So we're going to be in Esther chapter 4, starting in verse 1. But it says this: when Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes and put sackcloth and ashes and went outside into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gates, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter in. Wasn't dressed for the moment. In every province to which the edict and the order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend to her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gates. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay to the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show Esther and to explain it to her. And he told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence and to beg for mercy and to plead with him for her people. Have you ever found yourself in a crisis that you just didn't want to be in? You know those moments, it's those moments where you get the diagnosis, or someone gets the diagnosis. It's those moments where you get terminated for no apparent reason. It's those moments where your kid makes that screwy decision that you're like, I did not sign up for this. I do not want this. I do not want to be anywhere near this. And you find yourself in the midst of a mess that you didn't make, but it's suddenly yours. And everything that you had been focused on, all your plans, all the things that you were up to, all of the things that God had been engaging you in, now suddenly get put to the side to engage this crisis moment, this mess, as Marla talked about last week, that you get to engage in. Esther finds herself in another moment like this, where she realizes, oh man, all of my people are being executed out there. And this may eventually come to me. And it's becoming more clear why she has been given this position as the queen of the nation. And it's much bigger than her just enjoying her time in the palace, right? This is not like the Bachelorette, and she has been chosen, and now she gets to live her best life now. She is now clear, oh, I am actually here for this moment, in this position, for here. See, there are moments and threads that God will eventually bring you to that elevate your life to something far bigger than what you're up to, that are far bigger than your plans and your comfort and your desires and you living your best life now. It's no longer just about your story, but it's about your family and your community and your workplace and the nation around you. Wouldn't it be nice if God just kept it just you, right? Like God, can I just focus on my plans and the things I want and my comforts and my big ideas? But it rarely stays there. In fact, the more I have followed Jesus, the more I realize that he quickly moves me out of that position and elevates me into something bigger than just my plans, my well-being, my comfort, my looking good, my future in the middle of this. And this is what Esther gets invited into. And here's the thing. If you keep pulling on the threads that God has called you into, you will eventually find yourself in a place where your story expands beyond just you. And it demands you to elevate your perspective. And like Esther, when God does this, our natural response is to want to make it go away. Like, God, no, we're up to this over here. I'm doing the queen thing, right? I'm having wine and cheese parties. No, we don't need to do this whole like destruction of the nation thing over here. I'm not up for that right now in this moment. See, because she sees Mordecai making a fool of himself in the streets, wailing with sackcloth and ashes. He's out there wailing like a fool in front of the king's palace. And Esther's response is not, how do I address the systemic injustice? Her response is, shh, stop it. Get a change of clothes. What are you doing? You are making a fool of yourself. She wants to change his clothes so she doesn't get enrolled into this mess that she finds herself in. This is the modern day equivalent of like, shh, just don't say anything. You're going to offend someone. Just lay low. Let's just let this, don't rock the boat. It's going to make things worse. So calm down. This isn't exactly a courageous move by Esther. She's essentially saying, let's keep this under wraps. Let's brush it under the rug so we don't have to deal with this. I wonder how many of you, like me and like Esther, have found yourself in this place where you assume if we ignore it, it will go away. If I don't check my bank account, there will be no overdraft fees, right? If I don't get on the scale, the weight will not have been gained, right? If I don't have that conversation, the relationship will magically turn out, right? And this is where Esther finds herself, and this is oftentimes where we go. It's the more spiritual version of God's got this, right? I hope. And this is where Esther goes, and this is where we go. And here's the thing, it rarely goes away. It rarely solves itself when we are unwilling to intervene in the process. See, there are some threads that choose you, and there are some threads that you get to choose to step into. So this morning, as we step into this conversations, what are the threads that you have been unwilling to address? What are those areas in your life that you've already decided are too big or too heavy, or they're such a mess that you would rather say, hey, shh, just change clothes and make it look better, than actually address what is in front of you, why God has called you into this moment? So Esther responds to Mordecai's request in verse 10, chapter 4. It says this, then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal providence know that for any man or woman who approached the king in the court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death, unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to be with the king. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do you not think that because you are in the king's house, that you alone of all the Jews will escape? For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Here's what I found. Everyone wants to live an elevated life until they get the responsibility that comes with an elevated life. Everyone wants to be the leader until they are given the responsibilities of leadership. Everyone wants to be the one that's in charge until they are given all of the responsibilities and the weight that comes with being in charge. And Esther finds herself in this position where now she is elevated, and now she finds herself in a space with two very difficult decisions. I either force my way into the king's palace and I address him and, based on the law, should be put to death, or because I am ethnically Jewish, I will be put to death either way. So now she's forced herself in a rock and a hard place, and she is really the only one in the pipeline that can save her people now. See, I am convinced that God will and is and longing to put you in elevated positions in your life, to elevate your stature, to put favor on your life, so that your life actually expands at exponential rates, not so that you can kick back and live your best life now. I promise you. God did not give you the promotion simply to have more money in your pocket. He did not give you the influence so that you can kick back and say, look how many followers on Instagram I have. He did not give you the talents or the abilities or expand what's available to you so that you could kick back and have your most comfortable experience in life. He put you there for purposes bigger than you could ever imagine. And he's longing to have you step into those purposes that he has elevated to. And like Esther, you will find yourself elevated into moments that come with responsibilities that you don't feel ready for. And it will feel like a curse rather than a blessing. I remember at age 27, I was handed the leadership role to this community, which I look back now and I was like, who did that, right? And not only was I handed the leadership to this community, I was handed a 60,000 square foot building with $1 million debt on it that was in the process of being foreclosed. So at age 27, I remember thinking to myself, this is insane. I have no idea how to lead a community, let alone deal with $1 million foreclosure on a 60,000 square foot building in Chino. So we finally dealt with the foreclosure of the building, and we got the building sold and taken care of. And then I remember clear as day this moment where God said, I want you to move the entire community to Downtown Pomona. And look, at that point, Downtown Pomona was not a cool place to be. It's still kind of a little sketchy, but at that point, it was definitely not a cool place to be. I mean, everyone was like, was that the Lord? Or was that something you ate really bad that night? Because I think you need to go fast and pray a little more. And I was like, no, I am crystal clear. And I was so nervous moving an entire community because, look, Downtown Pomona is a little different from Chino Hills, folks. And so, not knock on Chino Hills. Love your Costco, right? But we moved the whole community here, and I was so anxious about what that was going to be like. And I remember we had our first Sunday, and we had a senior adults Bible study that met before our gathering. We found a restaurant in town with a private back room, and we bought them all breakfast. And I thought, man, we're going to set this up royally for them so they feel welcomed, they have a space, and we're going to get our gathering together. And after the gathering, I remember going to our senior adults and thinking, all right, how did it go? I'm so excited to see what God did in this new space that he's called us into. And I remember going to the leader and I said, hey, how did it go? Very first Sunday, like, was breakfast good? What did you guys talk about? I know new people showed up just because we're here. How was that? And he looked at me and said, the eggs are runny. It's not going to work. And I remember thinking, okay. And then, no kidding, 5 minutes later, I get a call from Marla, who was living in Afghanistan at that time, and she said, hey, would you just pray for us right now? There's bombs going off all around our house, and they're really close, and I just need you to pray for us. And in that moment, I just remember thinking, this is impossible. We have set ourselves up for a loss in every area here. I had no idea what I was doing. There was no resource. There was no possibility. There was no way out. All I had was a calling and an assignment on my life and the life of our community, and that was the only thing that I get to hold on to into that moment. And I was so excited that we had been elevated to Downtown Pomona at the Fox Theater, and in that moment, the weight of the responsibility felt crushing. I guarantee you that there will be times where God will move your life into positions that you feel unready for, unprepared for, and the weight of the responsibility will feel like it crushes you, like Esther in this moment. But it does not mean that he has abandoned you. What if it actually meant that he is setting you up, and not just you up, but your family and your community and your workplace and your city for something far bigger than you could ever imagine in this moment. And this passage ends with this really famous line, probably the most famous line from Esther, maybe arguably one of the most famous lines in the Bible. And we write these on like Bible covers and posters and Instagram posts. For such a time as this, right? Such like a good moment, right? Like, Mordecai, you have been set up for such a time as this. But you know what's interesting? We don't ever use the whole phrase or the punctuation at the end of that statement. because the whole statement actually says this, and who knows, maybe you've been given this position for such a time as this, ? This is not a guarantee, right? This is not Mordecai saying, God has spoken to me, you are made queen for this moment. He says, who knows? Perhaps this is why you're queen, ? Right? There is no promise, there is no prophecy, there is no guarantee. All Esther gets is a who knows ? And how many of you notice that in life, that's usually what we get? We would love a prophecy, we would love a guarantee, we would love a promise, but most of the time we get a who knows ? With an invitation into a life bigger than us and a responsibility that we feel completely unprepared for. What we do know is if she does nothing, there is a default future that's coming. If she chooses not to choose, life will be chosen for her. Death will be chosen for her. Her people's fate will be chosen for her. And I wonder, how often are we afraid of the who knows ? So we just don't act. We choose not to choose. And so when we find ourselves in these moments like, who knows how the conversation's going to turn out? Who knows how this big request is going to be answered? Who knows how this relational risk is going to end up? ? And because we are so afraid of the uncertainty that comes with the who knows ? we choose not to choose. We choose not to act. Or we say, I'll pray about it. And we hand it back to God. And we refuse to act in those moments, not recognizing that not acting actually guarantees a future that is coming, whether you like it or not. But this moment is the epitome of faith. See, I think faith, we have this idea that faith can only come when it comes with a guarantee or a prophecy or a promise, but faith actually looks like, who knows ? Let's jump and see if God is who he says he is. Let's move and see if we got the thread right. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. And this is where Esther finds herself, saying, I will go, believing that somehow God will come through. And in verse 15, it picks up with this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go and gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. How many of you, like me, are cowards by nature? Anyone else? I do a lot of brave things in my life, but trust me, I do them with knees shaking and horror inside of me most of the time. In fact, I would say that my default nature is afraid and fear. And isn't it annoying, those people who courage just seems to come naturally? Like they just go out and they'll take the mountain. Like, how did you get that, right? How do you... Why didn't God sprinkle a little of that on me when he made me over there, right? They make it look so easy. But I think that there's this misconception that courage is some innate character trait that some people have and others don't, that others are more inclined to and some are not, that some have it hardwired into them and others do not. And the rest of us are doomed to just fake it till you make it. But here's what I found, and what we see here with Esther is that courage is a decision long before it's a feeling. Courage is a decision to act long before you feel it or know it or have a plan. It's just a decision to go forward. Because trust me, Esther is not feeling it in this moment. I think we glamorize some of these big characters in the scriptures like Moses or David or Esther, right? We think, man, Esther just became the queen and marched into the king's palace and said, for such a time as this, right? And that's not what we see here. She doesn't say, gather everyone together for victory is imminent, right? She doesn't come together and say, the Lord will vanquish Hiram and all of his evil foes. He doesn't go and saying, I am sure of the outcome. She essentially says, welp, I'm going to do it, and if I die, I die. See, this doesn't sound like a courageous, self-assured woman. This is a woman who's saying, welp, we're going to give it a shot. We're going to go for it and see what happens. But there's something profoundly spiritual about making the choice before you feel it. Before you have a moment where it feels good or it feels like it fits you or now I've seen all of the reasons why this is going to turn out. See, if you are waiting to feel courage to act, you are going to be waiting for a long time. You are going to find yourself sitting on the sidelines wondering, when is it my time, God? Rather than stepping into the moment. See, and here's the thing. I notice for me, I hesitate to act because if I don't choose, if I choose not to choose, and then things go exactly the way I knew they were going to go, I can blame all kinds of people other than me. It wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything. I didn't act. I didn't make the decision. See, had Esther not acted, her people probably would have all died, and she would have eventually found herself in some massive trouble. But she could have easily at that point said, this isn't my fault. This is God's fault. This is the king's fault. This is Haman's fault. This is the man's fault. She could have blamed this on anyone but her had she not chosen. And I wonder how many of us just fail to choose because we don't want the blame to fall on us if things go poorly. We don't want to be left looking stupid or incompetent or not knowing what we're doing over here. We don't want our lives to fall apart, and so we choose not to choose because then we have someone to blame, and I never have to own the weight of the responsibility of my life. But on the flip side of that is I never actually get to experience the power of God working in me and through me as a result of that. And so we find ourselves living mediocre lives rather than stepping into the fullness. See, what would it look like for you today to act on that thing that you've been avoiding regardless of what you feel? Not waiting for courage to well up in you. Not waiting for a sign, but just deciding to act. And like Esther saying, well, if I die, I die. What would it look like to live from that space and to move into that type of reality, even acknowledging that it could go poorly, and that's okay? There's this other critical part that Esther does in this, is that she doesn't just decide to make a risky decision alone. She tells Mordecai, all right, I'm going to do this, but I need you to gather everyone up and fast and pray. I need you to gather everyone up, and we better do this together. Because if I act, I need to know that the whole community has been behind me. I can't tell you how many times people in my life have gone and made dumb decisions and then come and told me about the dumb decision that they made and how their life fell apart. And I thought to myself, wow, had we had that conversation, this would have probably gone a lot differently. How many of you have done that? I know I've done that. Where we make the dumb financial decision, and then we go, oops, everyone. we go and we make that screwy relational act, and it doesn't go as planned, and then we bring it to everyone and go, oops. Or we make that decision with our bodies or with our health, and then we come back and we go, oops. See, Esther didn't do that. Esther invited everyone into this moment before she acted, before she stepped out, before she moved into faith. She said, I need everyone praying. I need everyone there. Esther did not take this risk by herself. She invited everyone in. See, when you're about to make a courageous leap, when you're about to step out in faith and make that risk and say, well, if I die, I die, and who knows, this might be why I'm here. We are never to do that alone. These are the moments where we pull community in and say, I need you with me as I make this leap of faith with you. See, your willingness to pull community into your faith, to invite people into your most vulnerable and risky moments, says a lot more about you than it does even about God. How willing are you to invite people into the decisions in your life that feel risky and feel like they're going to put you in a vulnerable place and you have no idea how they're going to turn out? Are you willing to allow people into the process with you? And then it ends in Esther chapter 5, starting in verse 1. It says this: on the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her his gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king said, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom I will be given you." "If it pleases the king," replied Esther, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "Bring Haman at once," the king said, so that may do what Esther asks. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared, and they were drinking wine. The king again asked Esther, Now, what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." I would have settled for half the kingdom at that point. But anyways, Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this: if the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and to fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's questions." See, there are some threads that only move when you move. See, because in this moment, Esther takes a risk, and the king responds favorably, and she sets up banquets that are now in play with Mordecai and the king that will eventually lead to the salvation of her people. But it was because she chose to act in that moment. See, here's the thing. In life, there are some threads that will not move until you move. There are some places where God will not act until you act. And this is how God often moves in our lives. See, we are waiting for him to part the waters. We're waiting for him to show up and fire. We're waiting for him to do the unthinkable. And we say, "God, when you set the miracle up, I will totally walk through. When you move, I will totally move." And it rarely ends up that way. In fact, the miracle never comes. Because God says, apparently, you don't need a miracle. You got this. See, Esther could have easily sat back and say, "All right, God, you do your thing. If you want the people saved, that's not my responsibility." And she would have never seen the miraculous act that God moved through her in this moment. I wonder how willing are we to put ourselves in circumstances and pull on threads where the only answer is a miracle, where we say to ourselves and others, "And who knows? If I die, I die. But I'm willing to do this together to see God move in the process. But if I refuse, I sit back and do nothing, which will guarantee a future that I don't want anyhow." And courage is not the catalyst for this type of living. In other words, you don't need courage to live like this. Courage is the byproduct of living like this. See, when you choose to act when there's no guarantee, when you choose to take the risk and you don't know how it's going to turn out, when you just say, "All right, God, I am trusting that as I step out on this, you will find a way to work this all together for good." As you step out, come what may on the other side, you will walk away more courageous than when you started. You will walk away transformed into a more courageous human being as a result of this. And the God who is weaving together all these miraculous threads in your life, in the lives of others, in the lives of a nation, he will not be a theoretical, nice idea. He will be the reality that you live in, knowing the God who is weaving the threads together is working all things together for good in those moments. See, Esther starts out as an orphan refugee who was forced into an illicit relationship, and she emerges as a courageous leader saying, "If I die, I die." But she didn't start that way, and she didn't feel that way along the journey. It was birthed inside of her as she followed the thread that the Lord had given her. See, one of the greatest spiritual acts that you will ever engage in your life is simply to choose how you will move, to choose where you will act, to choose to decide today that no more time gets wasted. That I don't need a feeling, and I don't need to sit back and wait for God to give me the heebie-jeebies about that. I'm just gonna move. I'm gonna act, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna decide here in this moment, and in that process of choosing to choose, God will refine you come what may. So you can in those moments say, who knows? Maybe this is, and maybe it isn't. And maybe we'll die, and maybe we won't. But I know on the other side, I will come out transformed as a result of following a God who asks me to step out in faith. And your life will be radically transformed as a result of that. And here's the thing. It has massive, massive implications. Not even really for you, but for your family and your community and your workplace, for your friends and your neighbors. The world is looking for people who don't just feel courage, but act courageously and choose in a world that just clicks maybe, when there's an invitation into something bigger. What decision has God been asking you to make? What phone call have you been avoiding? What request have you been just unwilling to make because you're gonna look stupid? What area of your life have you just been digging your head in the sand saying, if I ignore it, it will go away? Because that's the area where Mordecai, like when coming to Esther, is coming to you saying, hey, perhaps you've been placed in this position for such a time as this, ? And maybe if you act, you'll die. But if you don't, you're probably gonna die anyways. So you might as well go for it and trust that God will be with you in the process. But doing nothing guarantees the same. But who knows? On the other side, you might have found the thread that transforms a nation and saves a people if you're willing to choose. Either way, you will become the person of courage, regardless of the outcomes. Just bow your head and close your eyes for me for a moment. This morning, if you're here in this room, and maybe this morning you've recognized that there is an area in your life that you've been avoiding. It could be your finances, it could be your health, it could be a relationship. It could be that thing that you're like, gosh, I'm deciding not to decide. And you're stuck. And you're waiting for a feeling of courage, or you're waiting for God to show up in a burning bush or to part the waters, and God's just saying, nope. Perhaps, ? And if that's you today and you're like, man, I've been avoiding, I've been stuck, I've been choosing not to choose. If that's you, would you just raise your hand and say, yeah, I'm in that place. Yeah, all over the room. Awesome. Yeah. I want to just pray for you today. Jesus, I pray that you would give us the courage, not the feeling, but the courage to act, to move, to decide, to step into the futures that you have called us to create. And God, we know there is no guarantee. But on the other side, God, would you move us and mold us into the women and men you've called us to become courageous. God, that we would own the responsibility that comes with the elevation of our lives. And that we would take responsibility for the gift that you have placed inside of us. And this morning, if you're here and you've not yet connected to Jesus, I just want to give you that opportunity. Because aside from him, all of this is just a wish and a prayer. See, the beautiful thing about Jesus is you can literally say, if we die, we die, and if you die, you win. That's the beautiful thing. It's a win-win. But it starts with you connecting to him and just stepping into relationship with him. And if that's you this morning and you're ready to step into a relationship with Jesus, to say, I'm ready to surrender everything and to step into connection with him, I want to make him like the boss of my life so that I can live out this courageous life. If that's you for the first time or the first time in a long time today, would you just raise your hand and say, I want to connect to Jesus today? Yeah, who else? Awesome. Yeah, so many. I want you just to, this simple prayer, it's actually another choice to step into. I just want you to just pray, Jesus, I give you my life. Would you just pray that? Would you make that choice right now? Jesus, I give you my life. and just hand your life over to him, I guarantee you that he longs to transform it into something beautiful beyond what you could ever ask or imagine. And my last invitation, by the way, if you made that decision this morning, I want you to just go back to Next Step and check in with them. But if you're here this morning and you've made a decision to follow Jesus and you've not yet been baptized, this is your choice. This is your moment. This is your Esther moment. This is your moment where you're going, man, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I got my makeup done and my hair looks good. And I don't know about clothes, blah, blah, blah. Nope. We got clothes, we got towels, we got everything for you. And so if today you have not yet made a decision to follow Jesus, or you've made a decision to follow Jesus, you have not yet made a decision to get baptized, at the end of this gathering, I want you to go right back out into the lobby to the left and just let them know I'm ready to get baptized. You can go right back to Next Step and say, hey, I'm ready to get baptized. You probably know you're ready right now if your heart's beating in your chest. And you're going, oh man, I don't know if I should. This is an invitation to you to say, to declare today out loud, like Esther did with the king, hey, I'm all in. And I'm willing to even make a fool of myself even if that's what it takes to step into that decision today. So Jesus, we thank you that you've called us to choose a life of courage. And so today we own that we are choosers today in a world that has chosen not to choose often. We are those who create the future with you and through you. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. Amen.